A filthy doctor in the neurosurgery department delivers the news that the young gremlin sitting before him is suffering from tremors. As the dumb boy stares down at his hands shaking while trying to use a computer mouse, the doctor clarifies that it is specifically a case of tremors. The baddie mother, looking quite anxious, wonders if this is going to be a major problem for her son's future, but the doctor reassures her that with proper medication and care, the boy will be able to live a perfectly normal life without any issues. While the mother breathes a sigh of relief, the little guy looks up and tells the doctor that something else is shaking besides his hands. The doctor, thinking he is being helpful, explains that the tremors can sometimes occur in the neck or the jaw as well, but the boy quickly points out that the shaking is not happening in those places either. Both the mother and the doctor are left looking quite confused, until the boy opens his mouth wide to show them exactly what he means. To their absolute shock, his tongue is vibrating at an incredible speed, leaving the people staring in pure horror at the strange sight. It is clear that this is a child who is different from everyone else, and because of this unique condition, he ends up living a life that is unlike anyone else's as well. As the years pass and the boy grows into a big boy, he reflects on how he has felt strange since he was young and how much he used to hate that so many parts of his body would constantly tremble. However, as time went on, he began to stop viewing his tremors as a disease and started looking at them as a special ability. While spending some personal time alone in his room and utilizing his high-frequency hand movements, he realizes that what once felt like a curse has become a very effective tool for his grip training sessions. He still remembers a moment from his childhood when he offered to give his grandmother a shoulder massage, and the intense vibration from his hands was so aggressive that the poor woman let out a scream of delight while her dentures nearly flew right out of her mouth. Back then, the young boy wondered if his strange ability would ever truly be of help to someone, though looking at his hands now as a big boy, he feels a bit skeptical about the whole thing. After finishing his morning routine, he stares at his buzzing palms and wonders where on earth he is supposed to use a skill like this in the real world. His deep thoughts are interrupted when he realizes he is going to be late, prompting him to rush out the door and head to his job at the local convenience store. Yujun hurries toward the convenience store and bursts through the door to find his boss already there. She greets him with a smile, noting that this little guy actually managed to show up early for once. Looking at her, Yujun is reminded of how pretty she is, and he tells her she should probably head home and clock off for the day. She gets a kick out of him calling her Nuna instead of boss, playfully telling him to show some respect even though she's clearly enjoying the compliment. Yujun considers her to be incredibly kind-hearted and considerate, especially since she looks out for him so well. She reminds him about a shipment of alcohol arriving later and tells him to keep an eye on the inventory, even offering him some food if he gets hungry. Yujun is genuinely grateful, thinking about how he initially mistook her for a young landlady when he first moved to Seoul. He recalls the interview where he practically had to beg for the job because she was hesitant to hire someone with his living situation, proving that he can be quite a persistent little monkey when he wants something. Back in the present, the boss starts rubbing her sore shoulders, explaining that she overdid it, moving stuff around earlier. Yujun chides her for not waiting for him to do the heavy lifting, but she insists she can still handle that much on her own. She mentions that her daughter bought her a massage gun recently, and describes how the high-frequency vibration helps her muscles relax when the high-volume end touches her. Yujun has a sudden realization about what kind of workout device she is likely talking about, but he keeps the thought to himself and simply promises to handle the moving work starting tomorrow. She finds his concern adorable and tells him to go put on his uniform, but Yujun can't help but wonder if his unique condition could actually be useful for once. He speaks up and offers to give her a massage himself. The boss starts to laugh it off, telling the dumb kid that her shoulders aren't actually that bad, but she suddenly freezes in absolute shock. She stares down in horror as Yujun's hands begin to blur into a high-speed vibration right in front of her. Panic sets in as she wonders if he is okay and why his hands are moving like that, but Yujun just looks at her calmly and explains that he was diagnosed with tremors when he was just a young boy. Yujun opened up about his issue and shared that he had gone through a lot of hard times because of them ever since he was young, but he had eventually gotten used to it. The boss looked at him with deep concern, softly calling out his name. He apologized for suddenly saying those weird things, clearly feeling flustered. Yujun scratched the back of his ear awkwardly, a bead of nervous sweat rolling down his face as the moment grew tense. The boss hesitated, wondering if she should really receive some kind of service from a young kid like him. After a brief internal debate, she gave in. Yujun quickly pulled out a stool and enthusiastically invited her to take a seat so she could relax her shoulders. The boss sat down a bit nervously and said, "Okay." For Yujun, this was his first time giving a massage to someone so pretty, and the dumbass felt his face burning with embarrassment. He placed his vibrating hands and began the conditioning session right away. The high-frequency vibrating hands worked her muscles with surprising power. Worried he had gone too far, Yujun asked if she was all right and apologized in case it hurt. To his relief, she told him to keep going. He continued the thorough hand endurance workout on her shoulders. The boss admitted she had only been a bit surprised at first. Yoo-jun gently asked if she was feeling refreshed. She replied that yeah, she really was, especially because of the strong vibration. The full-body training sesh carried on, delivering deep relief to her tired muscles. The boss sighed with happiness, saying it felt so good and refreshing. Then suddenly, the boss let out a sharp surprised yelp and stood up quickly. Yoo-jun panicked, sweating bullets as he called out to her. He kept apologizing profusely, thinking the idiot had completely ruined everything. In his head, the poor monkey was spiraling, convinced he was screwed and worrying that she was going to report him. But instead of getting upset, the boss walked over to the store door and locked it with a clear click. Yoo-jun called out to her in confusion. She turned around, looked at him, and simply said his name. Then, with a flushed face, she asked if he would train her a little more. And just like that, the special grip training session continued, as the boss leaned in for another round of his unique endurance training. Our story continues at the local neighborhood convenience store, where the hardworking boss, Mi-jong, is busy hauling heavy crates of inventory into the shop. She grunts under the physical strain, muttering to herself about how the suppliers just had to deliver all of her orders at the exact same time. Her lower back is already paying the price, sending sharp, painful twinges that make her regret placing those orders so long ago. Just as she is lamenting her sore muscles, her phone rings on the counter. It is a text message from her daughter, who lets her know she has just headed out. When Mi-jong asks if there is anything she wants to eat, the sweet girl replies that she wants a home-cooked meal full of her mother's love. It is a heartwarming exchange that brings a happy, emotional tear to Mi-jong's eye. However, life has not been easy for her. Behind her diligent exterior, Mi-jong carries a lot of silent stress. Ever since her partner had an affair and ran away with his new partner, she has had to manage everything on her own. To make matters more complicated, her daughter is completely against the idea of her mother going out again. Left with no other options, Mi-jong has to rely on her own special methods to find comfort. At night, she retreats to her room, pulls out a trusty hand gripper from her nightstand drawer, and treats herself to a grip training session. It is her own way of staying relaxed and getting by without anyone else's help. Then, one fateful day, the peaceful routine at the store is interrupted by the chime of the entrance bell. Yoo-jun bursts through the door, energetically greeting his boss. Mi-jong is pleasantly surprised to see him showing up a whole 30 minutes early, silently praising him for being such a diligent, hard-working young man. Yoo-jun quickly suggests that she should clock out and head home, which makes her view him in a slightly new, rather cute light. But then, the atmosphere shifts slightly. Mi-jong catches Yoo-jun quickly sneaking a glance down at her hands. Instead of being upset, she stands tall, feeling a wave of pride and thinking to herself that she definitely still has it. She quickly catches herself, though, scolding her own mind for having such sussy thoughts about a younger coworker. After all, she tells herself she is just an aging woman and shouldn't get carried away. Trying to play it cool, she starts rubbing her sore neck and shoulder, explaining to him that she overdid it moving stock earlier. That is when this bold little monkey steps up and offers to give her a shoulder massage himself. Mi-jong is caught off guard, stammering that her shoulders really aren't that sore. But before she can fully reject the offer, Yoo-jun holds up his hands, and they immediately blur into a satisfying feeling right before her eyes. Mi-jong stares at his palms in utter disbelief, completely baffled by what is happening and wondering what on earth is wrong with this kid's hands. She is completely overwhelmed by the sheer power of his unique conditioning session, leaving her absolutely breathless, sweaty, and silently marveling at the unbelievable feeling. Mi-jong, who has spent years carrying the heavy burdens of life entirely on her own, for the sake of her daughter, finally reaches a turning point. Despite briefly questioning what she is doing, the hard-working boss makes a firm decision to stop holding back her own muscle-building desires. She hangs a temporary closure sign on the glass door of the convenience store, choosing to shut out the rest of the world for a little while. A highly nervous Yoo-jun follows her closely, desperately trying to apologize for his earlier slip-up. The flustered young man admits that his strong hands had accidentally wandered toward her workout bags before he even realized what he was doing. But instead of reprimanding him, Mi-jong completely stuns him by telling him to go ahead and open the secret bag. The clueless monkey is left utterly bewildered, struggling to process what his boss could possibly mean by such an unexpected request. Seeing his hesitation, Mi-jong takes matters into her own hands. She gently grabs Yoo-jun's hand and places it directly on her bag, urging him to use his unique, strong palms to open and take out the tools for a direct endurance training session. With all doubts cleared away, they begin a high-intensity endurance training session. As Yoo-jun's powered hand conducts a powerful hand endurance workout, Mi-jong is left completely breathless and flushed, experiencing the relief of this highly proper training. The scene shifts to the bustling university campus, where Yoojun finds himself sitting in a classroom, completely lost in thought. His mind quickly drifts back to Mijong, but his thoughts spiral into a vivid daydream of his boss in an exercising state, imagining her joining him for an intense conditioning session. Before his imagination can go any further, he snaps back to reality with a sudden, panicked jolt that leaves him visibly shaken. His classmate, Hyunsoo, notices the sudden outburst and asks Yoojun why on earth he looks so incredibly terrified all of a sudden. Hyunsoo quickly changes the subject, apologizing for startling him and asking if Yoojun plans on attending the upcoming opening lecture party. Yoojun confirms that he is indeed going, and Hyunsoo happily agrees that they should head over together in a little while. Soon after, the group arrives at a lively local restaurant for the celebration, raising their glasses for a roaring toast. As Yoojun takes his very first sip of beer, the bitter taste of the alcohol hits him hard, forcing him to make a face as he realizes that this must be what maturity actually tastes like. While Yoojun is still recovering from his bitter drink, an older classmate with a chin-strap beard leans in, asking the younger students for their names. Yoojun introduces himself, only for the guy to smile warmly and remark that Yoojun is actually quite cute. This overly friendly classmate immediately starts invading Yoojun's personal space, rubbing his shoulder and making the poor guy feel incredibly uncomfortable. Yoojun silently screams for help in his head, desperately declining the guy's persistent offers for more food, extra drinks, and a secondary outing later that night. Sitting nearby, a blonde classmate gets a massive kick out of Yoojun's obvious suffering, laughingly telling him that his helpless misery is absolutely hilarious. Just as Yoojun is reaching his limit with his overeager admirer, someone taps him on the shoulder from behind. Still on high alert, Yoojun assumes it is another unwanted advance and reflexively tries to decline, shouting in a panic before he even looks. However, he quickly realizes his mistake when he turns around to see a remarkably attractive woman with dark hair and glasses who politely asks if the seat next to him is taken. Yoojun eagerly welcomes her to sit down, only to be completely stunned when another classmate reveals that this youthful-looking woman is actually one of their university professors. As the professor accepts a drink while sighing about how tired she is, Yoojun finds himself completely captivated by her stunning looks, silently celebrating that university life might actually be the greatest thing ever. The gathering soon transitions into a lively round of a classic Korean drinking game called Mountain Over Mountain. Yoojun explains the rules, noting that each player must perfectly copy the previous gestures before adding a unique one of their own, with a humorous warning to keep things friendly and polite. A short-haired classmate starts the game with a simple drinking gesture, but as Yoojun's turn approaches, his anxiety begins to spike. When it is Hyunsoo's turn, the bold classmate decides to do whatever he wants, copying the first gesture and then adding a highly proper movement. Yoojun is left in utter awe of his disgusting friend's sheer audacity, marveling at the wild nature of college life. The game intensifies when the next female classmate reluctantly copies the conditioning training gesture and then adds a bold endurance training trick as her new move. Yoojun watches in absolute shock as she shows a special endurance training trick to the beautiful professor, leaving our dumbfounded protagonist convinced that university life is truly full of endless surprises. The drinking game continues as the group watches eagerly, realizing that things are about to get quite challenging for the beautiful professor. Despite admitting that the situation is a bit difficult, she boldly decides to take her turn anyway. She smoothly copies the initial drinking gesture and then goes on to mimic the special conditioning gesture, leaving the entire table flustered. Sitting right next to her, our flustered protagonist, Yoojun, can feel his face burning up as the professor shifts closer to him. Leaning in with a smile, she politely asks to be excused for just a brief moment as she reaches out and touches Yoojun's hand, sending his heart racing in pure excitement. To Yoojun's absolute shock, the professor leans in and uses a special endurance training trick as her new addition to the game. However, the moment her hand makes contact with his hand, she immediately senses an incredibly strange, high-frequency charge radiating from him. Touching her hand in sheer disbelief, she realizes that they are actually tingling from the intense vibration of Yoojun's unique condition. Intrigued and completely captivated by this sudden feeling, the professor doesn't hesitate for a second. She pulls Yoojun and uses another special endurance training trick. Our lucky idiot is left completely dazed, happily concluding in his head that university life is indeed the absolute best. Meanwhile, the remaining classmates stare at them in dead silence, utterly speechless at the wild turn of events. Pulling back with a blush, the professor playfully claims she was simply too focused on the rules, before gently lifting Yoojun's chin and reminding him that it is finally his turn to keep the session going. Yoojun nervously agrees, realizing he has no idea how he is supposed to top a performance like that, but resolves to try his best since it is still just a game. However, before he can take his turn, he notices that his blonde classmate, Jiu, has suddenly vanished from her seat, prompting the others to wonder if she ran away in a panic. Smiling off the sudden exit, the professor raises her glass for another toast, and Yoo-jun eagerly gulps down his drink, suddenly finding the taste of alcohol to be incredibly sweet. Soon, the rest of the party winds down, leaving only Yoo-jun and the professor alone at the table. When Yoo-jun happily suggests that they should head home, the professor hesitates, asking if he wants to head over to her place for a special round 2 training session instead. Overjoyed by the invitation, Yoo-jun doesn't hesitate for a single second and eagerly accepts. While the professor waits for him outside, Yoo-jun heads off to pay the bill, walking into the night with a massive, triumphant grin on his face. However, his joyful mood is instantly shattered when a sudden, terrifying scream echoes down a dark alleyway. Rushing to investigate, Yoo-jun's eyes widen in horror as he spots Ji-woo being aggressively cornered and grabbed by her hair by an angry man. In a brief flashback to earlier in the night, we learn the real reason Yoo-jun was finally left alone. His chin-strapped male classmate had initially been hovering over Yoo-jun because he thought the young man was cute, but his attention was instantly stolen when 2 incredibly handsome men walked into the restaurant. Realizing his true target had arrived, the jealous admirer abandoned Yoo-jun's table to chase after them, leaving Yoo-jun utterly confused, but thankfully, free to pursue his own training adventures. The aggressive man corners Ji-woo in the dark alleyway, pulling her hair as she cries out in terror, while the hostile brute angrily questions if the poor girl has completely lost her mind. Just as things are looking grim, a loud, furious voice pierces through the darkness, calling the attacker a pathetic lowlife. The man turns around in utter confusion, only to be met with a raging Yoo-jun charging directly at him. Shouting about what kind of idiot would do such a thing, our brave but reckless protagonist launches into the air, executing a dramatic flying kick that strikes the attacker squarely in the chest. Ji-woo watches in absolute disbelief, stunned by the sudden heroic intervention. Unfortunately, the landing is anything but graceful. Yoo-jun crashes flat onto the concrete pavement, instantly regretting his flashy move as he realizes that looking like a total dumbass hurts far more than the actual physical impact. The angry attacker recovers quickly and stands menacingly over him, asking what on earth Yoo-jun is still doing sitting on the ground. Realizing he is in deep trouble, Yoo-jun can only stammer in fear before the ruthless brute retaliates with a brutal kick straight to his face. The man relentlessly beats Yoo-jun on the ground, furiously demanding to know who this interfering idiot thinks he is. Shielding his face from the onslaught of kicks, a battered Yoo-jun desperately begs the man to stop, claiming that he actually has something incredibly important to say. The attacker finally pauses, clicking his tongue in annoyance, and deciding to hear out whatever crazy nonsense this weird kid has to offer. But Yoo-jun was merely baiting him. The moment the man lowers his guard, Yoo-jun springs up and drives his index finger directly into the man's open mouth, initiating an intense, high-frequency vibrating throat conditioning session. Utilizing the powerful, high-speed vibration of his unique tremors, Yoo-jun's energized finger conducts a highly uncomfortable vocal cord workout deep inside the attacker's throat. The overwhelming discharging instantly triggers the man's gag reflex, leaving him violently vomiting all over the pavement. Yoo-jun quickly steps back, wiping his hand in pure disgust, and calling the attacker absolute scum for daring to hurl in public like a total animal. With the tables turned, an enraged Yoo-jun unleashes a barrage of powerful punches on the weakened attacker, yelling at the pathetic coward for daring to lay a hand on a girl. The man desperately begs him to wait, but Yoo-jun continues his relentless pummeling. Just as the attacker seems completely defeated, he finds a sudden burst of adrenaline, screaming in rage and throwing a heavy counterpunch that knocks Yoo-jun flat onto his back once again. Right at that moment, the beautiful professor rounds the corner and gasps in sheer horror at the violent scene, urgently demanding to know what on earth is going on with Yoo-jun. Still lying bruised on the ground, Yoo-jun points directly at the attacker and frantically tells the professor to call the police because the man was assaulting a girl. Ji-woo nods in agreement, visibly shaken by the entire ordeal. The attacker's face instantly pales as he desperately screams that he never actually hit her. But his frantic protests are cut short when Ji-woo pulls out her phone and immediately dials the emergency line. As she reports the assault to the police, the cornered attacker can only shout in pure, helpless despair, realizing his terrible actions have finally caught up with him. With the attacker running away into the rainy night, the professor rushes over to check on Yoo-jun, anxiously asking if he is alright. Our bruised protagonist wipes the blood from his mouth and grins proudly, declaring that he definitely won the fight. The professor remains deeply worried about his bleeding face, but Yoo-jun happily dismisses her concern, joking that he managed to land far more hits. He turns to Ji-woo to ask if she actually called the police, only for Ji-woo to giggle and admit that it was all just a clever bluff to scare the attacker away. Laughing at the trick, Yoo-jun remarks that if he had kept getting beaten up, things might have ended badly, though the professor reassures him that she would have stepped in to save him. Standing before him, a bashful Jiu politely thanks Yoojun for his incredible bravery before heading off to take a taxi home. Once Jiu is safely on her way, Yoojun suddenly winces in pain as his back begins to ache from the rough brawl. Concerned, the professor suggests that they should skip their planned after-party and head straight to the hospital instead. Yoojun laughs off the idea of a hospital visit, insisting he is perfectly fine, which prompts a smiling professor to suggest that they head straight to her place instead. Yoojun's eyes sparkle with excitement at the proposal, though as they arrive at her massive apartment building, he nervously wonders if it is truly all right for him to enter her home. The professor playfully teases him for bringing that up only now, welcoming him into the quiet hallway and reassuring him that they are completely alone. Yoojun steps inside, politely excusing himself as he struggles to get his shoes off in his excited state. However, as they walk into the main room, he is absolutely stunned to find the entire apartment in a state of complete chaos, with trash and empty bottles scattered everywhere. The embarrassed professor apologizes for the massive mess, but a polite Yoojun quickly reassures her that he doesn't mind at all. Resolving to help her clean up, Yoojun picks up a trash bag, but our clumsy boy immediately steps directly onto an empty plastic bottle. He completely loses his footing, slipping and sending himself flying through the air. In a bizarre twist of fate, Yoojun lands face first, burying his head directly into the professor's hand. As his face rests against her, Yoojun is briefly captivated by her pleasant scent, but the sudden contact reflexively triggers his natural high-frequency tremors. The intense, deep vibration from his hand transmits directly to the professor, initiating an unexpected and incredibly powerful full-body conditioning session. The overwhelming feeling catches the professor completely off guard, causing her entire body to tremble with shock. The sheer force of this sudden tremor workout causes her to accidentally lose her grip on her grip training tool hidden beneath her bag. With a small pop, a black grip training tool slips out from under her bag and rolls across the floor. The professor stands frozen and breathless, while a completely clueless Yoojun picks up the mysterious tool, wondering what on earth it is and even bringing it close to sniff it. Terrified of her secret being exposed, the panicked professor screams at him to stop and tackles Yoojun to the ground. A chaotic wrestling match ensues on the floor as she desperately scrambles to snatch the grip training tool back from his hands. Having successfully reclaimed her training tool, the flushed professor realizes she is completely mortified, recognizing how intensely shocked her body felt from Yoojun's tremors. Overcome with embarrassment, she quickly dashes out of the room, leaving a thoroughly confused Yoojun sitting alone on the messy floor. The secret grip training tool accessory flies through the air as the professor forcefully tackles Yoojun to the ground, pinning him flat on his back. While struggling underneath her powerful handhold, Yoojun's eyes wander to a shelf nearby, where he spots an official victory plaque. As he reads the inscription, he is hit with a terrifying realization. His opponent is Park Hae-un, a 33-year-old jiu-jitsu black belt who has won prestigious international competitions and holds multiple professional certifications in physical therapy and sports massage. Before our unfortunate hero can fully process this terrifying revelation, the skilled grappling expert smoothly wraps her hands around his neck, locking him in a brutal reverse triangle choke. Yoojun gasps and coughs in sheer agony, desperately crying out to ask why on earth she is doing this to him. The professor looks down at him with an ominous, glowing gaze, softly calling him her dear Yoojun as she demands to know exactly what he saw. With her powerful hands squeezing his neck even tighter, she menacingly whispers that she is thinking of doing some truly terrible things to him. Terrified for his life, the poor monkey desperately tries to lie, crying out that he saw absolutely nothing. But the professor refuses to buy his story, tightening her vice-like grip and accusing him of being a liar. Gasping for air, the panicked young man completely breaks under the intense pressure, screaming out the truth that he saw her secret grip training tool. Even after hearing the truth, the ruthless professor refuses to release him, calmly pointing out that she never once promised to let him go. As her powerful grip remains locked around his neck, Yoojun's vision begins to blur and his consciousness starts to fade, leaving him desperately realizing that he must find some way to escape this suffocating physical hold before it is too late. Under a bright and clear sky, the quiet university campus seems peaceful enough, but inside the professor's office, a rather sussy conversation is already taking place. A discussion begins regarding a potential volunteering club, with the beautiful Professor Hae-un wondering if a certain student has any interest in joining her team. She argues that with his highly unique skills, he could easily help a lot of people, though she decides to conduct an assessment to test his potential. Holding on to him to feel his muscular endurance, she makes him highly uncomfortable, as the clueless monkey wonders how his constant sussy power could possibly be of any help to anyone. The professor simply smiles and confirms that the intense way his body generates high-frequency vibration is exactly what makes him so special, leaving him to wonder what on earth she expects him to do with a condition like this. This sudden contact immediately triggers a rather painful memory from his high school days, back when a loud scream once echoed through the halls of his old school. A younger, 18-year-old Yoo-jun had tried to help his teacher by brushing something off her shoulder, but his high-frequency tremors caused a massive shock that led to a terrible misunderstanding. The poor teacher had reacted with absolute fury, demanding to know how he could touch her so carelessly, while a flustered Yoo-jun could only apologize and explain his innocent intentions. Sadly, the school rumors spread like wildfire, and the local gossips immediately labeled him a complete creep, leaving him thoroughly traumatized by how easily his condition could be misinterpreted. Remembering that painful past, Yoo-jun hesitates to accept the invitation, expressing his deep fear that he will only end up causing harm instead of actually helping people, since everyone always finds his tremors to be incredibly weird. But the professor gently takes his hands, looking into his eyes and assuring him that there is absolutely nothing weird about his condition, and that he is simply special compared to everyone else. As she feels the warm, high-speed vibration radiating from his palms, she softly remarks that it actually feels quite nice and reassuring, making the nervous young man realize that he might actually have the power to help others after all. Fully encouraged by her kind words, the naive idiot happily declares that he will join her volunteering club, but his joy is cut short when she casually instructs him to take off his bag for a quick checkup. Terrified by the incredibly sudden and bizarre request, Yoo-jun lets out a panicked scream and bolts straight out of the office, running down the school hallway as fast as his legs can carry him, while the amused professor watches him flee and quietly remarks on how adorable he is. Knowing she still needs official authorization to get the club up and running, Hye-eun fixes her hair and heads straight down the hall to the director's office. Inside, she meets her senior colleague, whom she politely addresses as her Unnie, only to be questioned about why she suddenly wants to revive a volunteering club that was shut down years ago. To test Hye-eun's resolve and stamina, the stern director reaches out to conduct a very direct physical composure test, forcing Hye-eun to struggle for breath as the director reminds her of the support she provided 3 years prior. Despite the intense pressure, a flushed Hye-eun tries to explain that things will be completely different this time, and that the club's activities will definitely be financially satisfactory for the institution. The director remains completely unmoved, warning her not to mess around, but Hye-eun desperately pleads for one last chance, insisting that her new student is the absolute real deal and possesses unprecedented physical capabilities. To verify these claims, the director applies a bit more pressure, causing Hye-eun's grip training tool to pop out onto the floor. Inspecting the black tool, the director notes with genuine surprise that it has actually grown in size, which clearly proves just how powerful the training effects of Hye-eun's new recruit must be. Completely exhausted and kneeling on the floor, Hye-eun begs her senior to believe her just this once, prompting the director to silently observe her before finally giving her approval, leaving Hye-eun deeply relieved and ready to move forward with her plans. Back in the administrator's office, the stern director is not about to take Hye-eun's word at face value and decides she will need to confirm these legendary abilities for herself. She points out that if the professor is indeed so confident in her new recruit, then this student must be the absolute real deal. Hye-eun, still recovering on the floor, is caught completely off guard by this sudden demand. She agrees that Yoo-jun's skills are indeed genuine, though she nervously wonders when exactly this verification process is supposed to take place.